Good afternoon and welcome back to Help for Docs. I'm Toni and my job is basically being the person who catches the gap between what happened in the room and what ended up on the claim. So this channel is where I break down CDI, coding, and HCC risk adjustment and revenue cycle topics for coders, CDI specialists, clinical documentation folks, and providers who want the real answer and not what could be a bunch of gibberish. All right, before we dive in, let's get the lawyer stuff out of the way. Everything I'm covering today is for education, not legal or compliance advice for your organization. Specifically, codes and guidance change, so always check your current CMS, AHIMA, AAPC, and ACDIS resources before you apply anything here to an actual case in your practice. Okay, thanks, and let's get into it. All right, starting with the basics, the facts. As of October 1st, 2025, Z59.86 stopped being a code you could actually bill, and it's now what's called a parent category, meaning that it exists in the classification, but it's not billable on its own. In its place, we have three new child codes. So Z59.861 is for difficulty paying for utilities, Z59.868 for other specified financial insecurity, and Z59.869 for financial insecurity when it's not specified by those two. Okay, so if your system or your super bill or your own habits still point to Z59.86, guess what? Now that claim is going to bounce back to you because it's no longer valid for reporting purposes. All right, so don't let this trip you up. Normally, when CMS retires a code, there's a clean replacement, and your EHR vendor pushes an update and you move on, right? Well, this one's different because Z59.86 doesn't map cleanly to a new code. It splits it into three, and picking the right one depends on what's actually documented. So that means that your EHR templates, your favorite lists, your super bills, all that's going to need your manual review because nothing's going to automatically know that a patient with a utility shutoff notice could be a Z59.861 instead of the unspecified code, if that makes sense. So somebody on your team has to kind of own that decision and build that into the logic. So why do we want to care about this and do all this beyond just and rather than just fixing a rejected claim? And that's because it fits a pattern. CMS keeps adding more specificity to social determinants of health every year. So those codes increasingly feed into risk-adjusted reimbursement models. And if your team defaults to the unspecified code, or even worse, still references the retired one, then you're not going to capture the full risk picture for that patient. And of course, as we know, downstream, that's going to have financial and quality implications. So, and it's going to be a red flag for an external auditor or reviewer. They're going to notice that. So, we want our processes to keep pace with the current code set rather than be running on last year's mappings, okay? So let me give you my suggested 4 steps to what to actually do about it. The first one would be go find every place that Z59.86 is still sitting in your system. So it could be templates, super bills, order sets, coding pick lists, all of these things. Second would be to build the internal crosswalk yourself. So of course, with clinician input, decide which scenario points to which of the three new codes. And then you want to get that logic documented and signed off on. And then the third suggestion would be go update the pick list so that staff are choosing from the correct options and not the retired ones. So the retired one shouldn't even be an option anymore. And then the fourth is to train your coders and your clinical staff. They need to understand the change before it shows up as a stack of denials. Okay, so if you can do those four things, you'll be ahead of the practices that are going to find out the hard way. Okay, so here we have the resources where I cross-checked this information. You know, I try to always make sure and check against multiple current sources because generally I find the information in an article. It could be anywhere. I read a lot of things, so it could be anywhere, but I always try to go back to CMS or one of the regulatory bodies to confirm what I'm reading. Um, so this is the list of where these are checked in case you also want to dig in further. Now you have the information. We have CMS and NCHS's own fiscal 2026 guidelines. And then, you know, AAPC and ICD-10 data are some pretty decent sources too. So, you know, as always, I just encourage you to go verify the things yourself before you make any changes. So that was pretty quick and easy, right? Kind of painless. Well, maybe not the follow-up steps, but understanding it, I think, is pretty painless. That's the Z59.86 update in full. So if you're working on these kinds of things, outpatient CDI, HCC risk adjustment, auditing, um, physician education, and you need some help building this kind of internal crosswalk or training your team or whatever it is, please feel free to reach out on the contact form on helpfordocs.com. And once again, I want to thank you for taking your valuable time to spend with me to watch this short video today. And I hopefully will see you in the next one, or you'll see me. All right, thanks so much.